Hi, this is Vivoy. I'm going to provide an answer to the question that you've read in the title of this video. However, unfortunately, this answer will not be comprehensive. It's gonna be as good as you can get, or as good as I can provide, just by improvising and putting together the thoughts I've got on my mind. So here it goes. How to understand a woman and understand yourself. The situation is as follows. I've recently come across a definition of what a woman is, and this definition was the following. Woman is a stage between a child and a man. I mean a masculine man. And I find this definition highly limiting and quite frankful, to be honest. However, also being harmful. So, what's frank about this definition? Let's extract some, let's say, truth out of it. So the definition says that it is a woman is somewhere in between a child and a man. So what does it mean? It actually means that a woman possesses some childlike qualities and some qualities that a man does not necessarily possess. Like, for instance, it's not in the definition, but we may conclude that she's not, let's say, as serious as a man is, or maybe focused. So she's like closer to a child. So what does it mean that she's closer to a child? That means that she possesses qualities that appeal to children. And it is like very clear that she has to possess such qualities if she is supposed to meet a new generation, to meet a new human being. So she has to be bubbly, joyful, and she has to be understanding somehow of what a child is. Because as a woman, she has to take care of the child and protect it. And by protect, I also mean that a woman protects new generation from all the possible evil happening in the world. And interestingly, lots of evil happening in the world happens from the hands or from the side of men. Men are those who end up in prison, in jail. Men fought in wars. So a woman has some kind of needs to have some kind of protective and cheering qualities for the new generation to come to existence and to develop well. Now, what is harmful about this definition is that it's limiting, and I'm going to explain that. However, it is interesting to understand the limits of masculine understanding of a woman. And what are the limits? The limits are as follows. A masculine man, by nature, is not equipped with all the molecules running around a female body. So a man is not equipped with all the hormones that a female has. And a man cannot feel all those molecules within his body because he does not possess them. Those molecules create lots of emotions that a man cannot have. So a woman is generally different in her emotional and nervous system. And a man cannot use his rational knowledge to grasp the understanding of those two systems. Are there any workarounds around it? this situation may be circumvented by developing a model of what a female mind is like, or female behavior is like. Before I explain how to do this, there is encouragement within human nature to achieve this goal. The encouragement stems from the fact that human beings, all of them, male or female, are inborn with something that is called a theory of mind, or theory of consciousness, theory of other sentient beings' capabilities. Human beings are able to gauge intelligence of other human beings. And it is something that only humans have developed. Interestingly, lots of experiments show that apes or other ape-like mammals do not really possess such a theory of mind as humans have. However, a man is not inborn with a theory of a female mind. Nevertheless, if we are inborn with a theory of mind, then by interacting with other women, seeing their behaviors, how they act, how they react, one can, I believe so, develop a model of a female. And such a development is possible through repeated interactions with other women. And subconscious mind, in that process, will create more or less an approximation of what female mind, female behavior is like. So it's quite encouragement. It's quite an encouragement to do so. And I think it's very important to do so, to understand what woman is like in general, and to interact with them. Now, what is the most limiting thing in the definition of what a woman is, based on the definition that a woman is a stage between a child and a man? The most limiting thing is that it puts a woman below a man, like in between. And this is the limiting part which needs to be explained, because it does not grasp a definition of a modern woman, who a modern woman is. And a modern woman will tell you that modern women want to be simply human beings, and they want to partake in all the activities, struggles or victories, overcomings of other human beings. Now, it means simply that a woman wants to gauge herself on a scale of how good of a human I am, what I'm capable of, what I am able to overcome, what I'm able to transcend. Transcend means to go beyond. And I think that when women act like that, it is usually looked down upon from other men, because women start competing with other men. So a woman in this way transcends the original definition, because she wants to be a human being, and this has to be understood. Now somebody can say that, okay, so we've got a woman that, for instance, wants to show how strong she is, physically strong, and she takes part in a competition of arm wrestling. And she manages to, let's say, win the last position in a tournament. So somebody could say, okay, but she ended up last. So what's the point of it? The point is that even by taking the last position, she actually outcompeted many men who never even thought of taking part in the competition, or they were simply weak men, unable to take even the last position because they did not qualify to compete in a competition in the first place. What is more, such a woman even outperformed lots of other women who have never thought of taking part in the competition. So in general, such a woman actually transcended lots of human beings. So she overcame her own weaknesses, struggles, and she actually beat in a competition. She has beaten in a competition lots of other human beings. And that makes her a human. Now, the other part of the video is how to understand yourself as a human. Well, let's go as far as we can when it comes to European culture. So, European culture was founded basically by ancient Greeks. And Greeks in the ancient times developed certain values, qualities, which they called virtues. And those values were like generosity, being smart, intelligent, being strong, being just, generally positive values. And they believed that once you've got those values and you embody them firmly, you do not change them, you stick to them, then those values define who you are. So if you want to know who you are, you'd better ask yourself what values are within you, what values you act upon. Then you will know who you are. Socrates had a slightly different approach. He would examine, for instance, the values, and he would ask other people questions of different nature, and those questions were supposed to arrive at a conclusion of who a person, for instance, is. And in the end, Socrates arrives at a very disappointing conclusion, and he says that, well, we cannot really know anything. So I know that I don't know. So the only knowledge that he came up with after asking his questions and examined those questions, he arrives at that very disappointing conclusion, which does not say much. So it only says that we lack a lot. Now, moving on, in modern times, well, not really in the modern times, a bit earlier than modern times, but still quite closer to our contemporary times, there was Descartes. He was a French philosopher, and he continued the Socrates' method of asking questions, and he basically asked questions in a skeptical manner, and he tried to figure out what is left in the end when all those skeptical questions are asked. And again, his conclusion is also quite disappointing, but it says a little bit more than Socrates' conclusion. So the Descartes' conclusion was that human beings are basically thinking. You are a thinking being, cogito ergo sum. He also added something to that, and he believed that at the bottom of all the doubts, he manages to find a supernatural quality of a human being that was supposedly be a grain or a spark of God. So in Descartes' mind, you are basically a thinking being with a spark of God. That says a little bit more, but it's still unsatisfactory. So many modern thinkers, like self-help gurus, will tell you that you are actually great. So this way of thinking stems from, I believe it may be correlated to Descartes' way of thinking, because it already gives you, endows you with a very positive quality, like greatness. So you've got something already given, and you can build up upon that. Nevertheless, it implies that you've got to develop something. Now, coming back to earlier philosophers than self-help gurus, there were existentialists who would not even say, like Descartes or modern gurus, that you are great. They would say that you've got to develop yourself somehow, whatever the way you want to adopt. Maybe you want to adopt a way of the ancient people by adopting some firm values and sticking to them. Nowadays we live in times of relativism, so having firm values is completely unfashionable. However, there are some examples from even modern times where adoption of strict values and sticking to them, like even religious Catholic values or those strict values of the ancient people, could yield interesting results, even bordering with creating living miracles. One example I can recall is a man from the Second World War who volunteered as an American to take part in the Second World War, attacking. He was deployed to attack Japanese army, and he refused to carry a gun. He volunteered as a nurse, as a medic. And he stuck to his values. He never shot a single bullet. He was scorned by all his fellow members, army members. He was looked down upon, yet he was the one saving platoons of people and showing great bravery. And this is a real story. It is even depicted in a movie. So people may adopt a way of life of adopting strict values. That's one thing. The other thing is like what the existentialists say, that you may actually adopt any path you want. So they do not limit themselves to values. They just say, create yourself to your own liking, to whatever you find purposeful, meaningful. Find it, do it. So such a way of thinking goes well with the ideas of self-help gurus that will tell you to develop yourself from scratch. It even goes in line with some modern movies like Fight Club, where Tyler Durden basically says that nobody is special, you are not a special snowflake, do what you want. However, this do what you want thing goes a little bit beyond creating yourself, because it implies that there are really no limits in which you can act and you can achieve anything. So there is a scene in which he holds a gun to somebody's head and he says that that person should pursue his goal while thinking that the gun is pointed to their head, and in this way, under the pressure of a gun, everything can be achieved. This is a Hollywood vision. Now, what the reality is that I believe that some people may perform well under immense pressure, but some people will not. Actually, some people will need a balance between pressure and the lack of pressure. So certain movies or certain self-help gurus that promote never stopping, just overcoming, may be detrimental, because in such a way a person may over-exhaust themselves. So in a way there is a conclusion to be drawn, and again this is a conclusion from ancient philosophy. Aristotle would say that always choose the middle ground. So if you want to know yourself, it is good to see what are your limitations on both ends. So for instance, what is the uppermost thing that you can do and what is the worst thing that you can do, and what you are should be a line drawn in between these two things. Also, Jordan Peterson says something similar, and he says that if you want to know the reality, also for instance the reality of yourself, you should visit both extremes, see what is it like to be there on high end and on the low end, and make sure you draw the conclusion while standing in between those two extremes. So this is a hint that supposedly may tell you something about you, which requires, of course, testing. What is more, when it comes to a basic understanding of who you might be, let's now come back to the existentialists saying that you've got to create yourself because actually you are not inborn with anything and the only path is forward by creating yourself. There is also a similar position, I believe so, but in my opinion a bit more negative, held by Buddhists or similar religious philosophies that claim that human being is actually nothingness, and the best way to live your life is to collapse in that However, it leads you in the opposite direction. Instead of creating yourself, they would actually advocate that you collapse into nothingness. Maybe there is some point to it, because when we think about the extremes, one of the extremes of greatness is the high end, and the opposite is the nothingness. So maybe as an experiment, it is worth trying some Buddhist methods to see what it's like to be nothing, but don't turn into complete nothing, because many Buddhists will actually pursue a form of religious suicide by becoming a living mummies. So this is not, I think, the best way to live your life. However, there is some merit to their way of thinking as well, I think, if it's not put to the outermost extremes. The danger about extremes is that when you visit any of them, either on the high end or on the low end, it might be difficult to come back to some baseline. So have that in mind, because it can be incredibly risky. Just like the saying says that one should fear entering chaos because one may become chaos. So there might be no way to putting yourself in order. Or like Jordan Peterson says, that when you look into the abyss begins looking at you, and you may be confused of who you are and what abyss is, and you may become the abyss, right? It could be a possible danger here. So what is more to discover about yourself is in your behavior. And many people state that you are what you do. You are how you behave. Your behavior defines you. And I think this is incredibly powerful way of examining yourself. Just let's take an example of Hulk Hogan, one of my favorite wrestlers. I used to watch Hulk Hogan, and now he is retired. He says that when there is 8 o'clock and he is on his retirement, he cannot stand still because he's on the go for the ring to fight. So his previous behaviors got ingrained in him to such a degree that his body and his mind simply demands reenactment of those behaviors. So this is how powerful behavioral patterns can become. Now, when thinking about other people like that, of other professions, many truck drivers also cannot stand still in their homes for too long. They cannot stay still for too long, and they feel like they want to go hit the road, as people say, because this is what they have trained themselves to do. Similarly to that, war veterans who experienced war and basically adopted all the behaviors they needed to adopt during the war to survive cannot find themselves in a situation of peace, and they act upon previous behaviors. So what you do actually changes you and defines you. Now one may say that, okay, so I've got control over my behaviors, so I can know myself. Well, you can control your internal behaviors, but now let's take into account the situation that other people want to control you and your behaviors. For instance, when you are in a mall, like a shopping galleria, the floor may be made in a checked pattern. Such a checked pattern encourages human mind to walk faster. So there are ways to manipulate human behavior in a way that it is subconscious. So there are factors actually trying to make you adopt certain behaviors and do certain things. So in order to understand oneself and how oneself changes, also those external factors and external influences have to be taken into consideration. Even when we think about those behaviors as really complex, we can go even down and think, what are the basic behaviors that actually are indispensable and that simply define us and we cannot do without them. And if we ask such a question, we arrive at a conclusion that those simple behaviors are around the basic needs, like food eating. And many people also claim that one way to answer the question of who you are is to ask the question of what you eat. What are the compounds that you put into your body? It is very interesting when we think that basic molecules that make brain run are neurotransmitters. So for instance, we've got dopamine, we've got serotonin, and many similar molecules. And when you look at dopamine and serotonin, you realize that their structural formulas contain the same chemical elements, but they are organized in a slightly different way. And the most crucial elements are phosphorus and that N element. So you've got to look it up. What it is. So when we think that we've got these basic compounds that we are made of, the conclusion is that we are actually run by those compounds somehow. And a smart way to live is to give your body the exact compounds it needs. So the dietary choices actually tell a lot about you, whether you take care of yourself or not, and how smart you are about taking care of yourself. So what you put in that basket in a galleria while being influenced by external factors is incredibly important. It is also important if you take a person into account who completely skips the idea of building yourself up from the diet, a good diet, a positive diet that is rich in the compounds that you need, and that person goes straight into my Mephistopheles' restaurant, for instance, if you know what I mean. It may be not that bad in the end when we go into a deeper when we compare somebody who does something even worse. For instance, a person who not only eats at Mephistopheles' restaurant, but also pours alcohol into his body. In the Arabic tradition, it is believed that the word alcohol stems from Arabic term al-kul, and al-kul means thief of soul. So the word alcohol and al-kul are closely related. So if al-kul means thief of a soul, then consumption of alcohol by somebody tells a lot about this person, what this person does to themselves. Now, if we were to decipher what is stolen by alcohol apart from breaking the various parts of cells in a body, what are the detrimental aspects of alcohol, and what are the detrimental aspects of alcohol when it comes to human psyche, is the fact that alcohol tends to deprive mind of the ability to create dreams. So it basically shuts down the ability to dream properly. And Jung, a psychoanalytical thinker, says that in order to understand yourself better, you should draw your attention to the messages that are within your dreams. And without the possibility to dream anything, you cannot receive the messages from the dreams. So you cannot have the insights into yourself. Not to mention into insights of other people, like understanding of women, for instance. That's it. Like, subscribe, follow.